Hey everybody, welcome back once again to another episode of The Art of Photography. My name is Ted Forbes, as always. What I want to talk about today is 35 millimeter, and I've had questions with people via email recently. It's interesting to me that film in the last couple years is starting to make kind of a big comeback. Some of that may be kind of trendy. I think people commonly want to shoot, or they do shoot digital, they have a DSLR, and they kind of get bitten by the film bug, and they want to go experiment with film a little bit and see what that's all about and enjoy some of that. And I got a question recently about getting into 35 millimeter. Somebody actually emailed me and was wondering, there's obviously, you're looking at, 30 years of cameras, and there's all these different models and stuff, and what do you choose from and all this. I will say this, that it really doesn't matter as much. It's a lot less critical than something like a modern DSLR. And I'll explain why. Because modern DSLRs, what you're basically paying for, or the reason you would want to upgrade your DSLR body over the years, is that every couple of years, or every year sometimes in some cases, cameras get better and these sensors get better. They have a better dynamic range, they have more megapixels, they are sharper, they just are better design, they have better color rendition. And so there are reasons why you would want to buy a new DSLR body. However, with 35 millimeter, you don't have a sensor, you're using film. And so you more or less, changing your film type, which is much cheaper, changes that out quite a bit. So if you're looking for an older 35 millimeter camera, because there really aren't many new in production today, it really doesn't matter too much. I mean, Canons work great. This is a little Canon A1 that I've got. There are all kinds of models, much like DSLRs, and usually it's a little bit of features, metering, stuff like that. I would get one that probably, I would suggest if this is your first time with 35 millimeter, you get something that's probably built in the 80s or early 90s. And the only reason I say that is because the metering functions are a little better than, say, maybe a Nikon that was produced in the late 60s. You're just gonna have a more crude meter. Although that's kind of fun too, and unfortunately, when you get into that zone, you get into collector item cameras, and so you're going to pay a lot of money. You really don't need to get a Leica, or you don't need to get anything really expensive, particularly if you're just trying this out. There's a number of Canons that are great. I unfortunately own way too many of these just because they're fun to get into. I've got several Nikon bodies that I like a lot. The ones I would recommend, especially on the Nikon line, the classic models over there are my favorite, which is the F3, which was made for years. It's a great camera. The main reason that I like the F3 so much, and I should have pulled that out, was it has an emphasis, and it's really easy to use, on aperture priority metering. And so literally, it's a little different on this camera, but you twist the ring collar to set your aperture, and then it will compensate the shutter speed as a result, and gives you a little readout. And it's just a very simple camera to use. There's really not much to it. The F3 is really good. The FE2 is really good. I'll put links to these in the show notes, so if you check out the website at theartofphotography.tv, or if you're watching us on YouTube, I'll have links in there for everything. So, but anyway, the F3, the FE2 is a really good one. The FM2 is really good. I mean, you're really not going to go wrong with any of these. If you really want to go on a budget, I would recommend either getting into Minolta gear, which is very inexpensive, particularly when you want to buy lenses. There's not a whole lot of collectability with Minoltas. Doesn't mean they're not great cameras, they are. But it's just a little more inexpensive to get into. The other thing I would look at is like Pentax, like the K1000 is like, for years was the ultimate student 35 millimeter camera. All of these have, for the most part, these old SLRs have detachable lenses. So I can just take that right off. And I would suggest that, in your lens arsenal, I really like to shoot prime lenses a lot. And so I would suggest in your lens arsenal, you get something that's kind of on the wide end of the spectrum, like maybe a 24 or a 28. If you go lower than that, you're going to start seeing some collectible stuff and rarity come up, so the prices are higher. But, something that works, 35 millimeter even. And I would get a good standard lens, like this is a 50 millimeter. This is a 50 millimeter 1.4, and it really didn't cost a lot of money just because it's more or less an obsolete camera. In some terms that they don't make anymore. I would get a portrait lens too, so something like either an 85 millimeter, or with Nikon, one of my favorite lenses is the 105 millimeter, and it's actually the 105 2.8 or 2.5. Sorry, there's a 2.8 also. There's a 105 2.5, which is a really classic lens that I like, and just kind of experiment around and shoot with things. You can also get zoom lenses with old 35 millimeter cameras as well. So If you want some versatility, Canon, basically, much like DSLRs today, they've changed the mounts on them. Canon lenses have changed their mounts completely, and there's not a whole lot that you can mount this lens to anymore other than a Canon 35mm camera. I believe you can get adapters for 4/3 format cameras. I haven't tried it, but I think that option is available, but that's really about the only versatility you'll have. Whereas if you went the Nikon route, Nikon lenses, with some exceptions, will still mount to modern Nikon cameras, and you can get adapters to mount them to Canon cameras. The focal distance is such that is available. You lose a lot of the functions on them. They're going to be fully automatic or fully manual lenses. Like, you don't have autofocus anymore because they were manual focus lenses. You also have limited control over aperture, stuff like that, so your metering changes, but you can use those lenses. One of the things that I used to use my Nikon lenses a lot for was when I was shooting, or when I shoot DSLR video on my Canon, because they will mount and you're not using autofocus or changing your exposure in those situations, and it's all live preview, so they work really nicely for that. So just some thoughts on that. If you're wondering where to get used gear, because you're really not going to find much of this new anymore, you could certainly try thrift shops. eBay has been very popular. I've bought stuff off of there before. I don't recommend it as much because generally you're going to get something that somebody pulled out of their attic that's been sitting a long time. You can do okay with that, but sometimes you find a camera that doesn't work, some stuff's broken with it, and even if you can, haggle with the seller a little bit and get your money back or refund or something like that, it's still a time-consuming and it's an annoyance, and a much better route. And full disclosure here, I don't get sponsorship or kickback, but I've shopped with these people and I really like them. There's a website called KEH, and I don't know what that stands for, but it's KEH.com, and they sell used gear, and they also go through everything, and they're very upfront with what works. If something doesn't work, they tell you. I'm pretty sure that they, to some small degree at least, overhaul cameras, so my luck on there has been pretty good. The thing you should know about KEH is this, and I think this is really pretty cool, is they rate all of their camera gear on there, and they only sell, for the most part, used gear. And they have a rating system, which is basically ugly in worst condition, and then they have excellent plus condition on the high end. And their rating system is very conservative. I've bought stuff, in fact, I generally buy bargain condition used gear when I buy from them, and it's just fine. It looks new. They're very strict with their ratings on that. I've even bought lenses that were marked ugly condition, and sometimes you're going to start to get blemishes in there, but they're all still usable for the most part. I've bought stuff that works just fine, no blemishes that would affect the picture quality at all, although they do warn against that. I've just never had bad luck with them. Usually they're excellent, and excellent plus ratings indicate that it's got the original boxes and it's really going to come looking like you just bought it off the shelf and it's going to be new. So anyway, you can save a lot of money and a lot of headache going with KH, and I really recommend them, particularly 35mm gear. They've got a lot of stuff on there. They've got a ton of lenses, but you might try putting together a 35mm system. It's actually a lot of fun to play with. One of the things, and I'll end with this, is one of the reasons I like 35mm, it does have a certain look to the film. It's not going to be as crystal clear and sharp and convenient and this certain beauty that digital cameras have. It's got its own beauty. It's a little more low resolution. You can get a big scan out of it. You're going to see film grain probably that you wouldn't see in a DSLR. The colors and the film choices that you've got, that's kind of the reason to go for it, and there's a certain look to that that's really difficult without a lot of post-production, and even then kind of difficult sometimes to achieve with the digital camera. I also like to shoot black and white film, and there's a certain look to real black and white film that again, without a lot of post-processing and messing around, you just get it right out of the camera. And so those are some really good reasons to want to go shoot 35mm. There is I remember a couple years ago, I was in New York, and just north of Houston Street, there's a Leica gallery that's over there. And the front part of the Leica gallery is a camera store with very expensive cameras in it. And the back part is a gallery. And at the time, and I don't remember who it was Bill Ray or somebody like that, probably Bill, because there was a bunch of photos of Marilyn Monroe and her wedding and the like. And that was kind of one of the first times that I realized, and these were blown up to 16:20, which is kind of a dangerous area to blow up a 35mm negative. But there's a certain look that you don't get with other formats, even with other film formats like large format or medium format, that is really beautiful. It's like the grain is just the right size and the resolution is just the right way, and there's a real classic look to that. When you think back to the photographers of the late 40s through probably the 60s, the guys like Henri Cartier-Bresson, Robert Frank, those guys that really had kind of that classic look to them. So anyway, those are just some things to consider. And you know, there's just also the convenience and ease of use. One of the things that kind of bothers me about modern digital equipment is that it starts feeling like a computer in a lot of ways. And this isn't a bad thing. You have a lot more control and a lot more options when you're shooting. However, there's something about being spontaneous about that that is more difficult. So, you know, if I have to scroll through menus on the back of a camera to try to figure out how to change a setting, for me, sometimes that can take away certainly from spontaneity and being in the heat of the moment. Whereas a 35mm camera, you got a fixed ISO and they're largely aperture priority. And actually getting into shutter priority starts requiring a little bit of fiddling. But there's no computer screen to go through, there's no dials, there's just a handful of settings that you set and go on here. And for me, that brings back a lot of the fun in just being spontaneous and shooting pictures. Again, this is not a film versus digital debate. I think, in fact, I'm supporting both, saying they're both valid. But for those of you who want to get into 35mm and try it out, I thought I'd give you a little overview of where you can find cameras, what to look for, stuff like that. So anyway, once again, follow me on Twitter. My name is Ted Forbes. My handle is twitter.com/TedForbes, and visit the show's website at theartofphotography.tv. And once again, my name is Ted. Thank you for watching.